Close your eyes and prepare to journey back through the sands of time, to an era when gods walked among mortals and kings wielded powers that defied the natural world. Ancient Egypt, a civilization that flourished for over 3,000 years along the fertile banks of the Nile River, remains one of history's most enigmatic and fascinating cultures. At the heart of this magnificent civilization stood the pharaohs, divine rulers who were believed to be living gods, intermediaries between the mortal realm and the eternal heavens. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, we will uncover the mysteries that surrounded these god-kings, their hidden powers, their secret rituals, and the extraordinary lives they led behind the golden masks and towering monuments. The pharaohs were not merely kings, they were magicians, priests, warriors, and keepers of ancient wisdom passed down through generations. They commanded armies, built monuments that still stand today, and possessed knowledge that modern science is only beginning to understand. But what made them truly extraordinary were the secrets they guarded, the mystical practices they performed in the darkness of temple chambers, and the powers they claimed to possess over life, death, and the forces of nature itself. As you relax deeper into comfort, let your mind open to these ancient mysteries, and prepare to discover truths that have been buried beneath desert sands for millennia. Our story begins in the pre-dawn darkness of Thebes, the great capital of Egypt during the New Kingdom, around 1350 BCE. The city sleeps beneath a blanket of stars that seem impossibly bright, untouched by the light pollution that would come thousands of years later. In the royal palace, a young pharaoh named Amenhotep awakens not from sleep, but from a vision. The vision came to him as it came to all pharaohs who truly understood their divine nature, through the practice of dream incubation, a mystical technique where the pharaoh would sleep in sacred temples to receive messages from the gods. Tonight's vision was particularly vivid. He saw the great god Thoth, the ibis-headed deity of wisdom and magic, standing before him with a scroll that glowed with celestial light. But before Thoth could reveal the scroll's contents, Amenhotep awoke. The young pharaoh knows this is no ordinary dream. It is a summons. Rising from his golden bed, draped in linen so fine it seems woven from moonlight itself, Amenhotep moves through the palace with purpose. His sandals, crafted from the finest leather and adorned with lapis lazuli, make no sound on the polished stone floors. Around his neck hangs the Wajet-I amulet, a powerful protective charm that every pharaoh wore, believed to contain the regenerative powers of the god Horus. The palace is not entirely silent, for the priests who serve the pharaoh never truly sleep. They maintain eternal vigilance, performing hourly rituals to ensure the cosmic order, the Ma'at, remains balanced. These priests possess their own secrets, knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and magic that they guard jealously. They can predict eclipses, calculate the flooding of the Nile years in advance, and perform surgeries that would not be matched in sophistication for thousands of years. But even they do not know all the secrets of the pharaoh. Amenhotep makes his way to a part of the palace few have ever entered, a hidden chamber accessed through a door carved with protective spells in hieroglyphics so ancient that even the oldest priests cannot fully translate them. Wait, you might wonder, what could these spells actually do? The ancient Egyptians believed that words had physical power, that properly spoken or written incantations could literally reshape reality. The pharaohs were trained from childhood in the art of Hika, the Egyptian concept of magic that was neither good nor evil but simply a natural force, like gravity or magnetism, that could be harnessed by those with the knowledge and divine right to do so. Modern archaeologists have found evidence of this training in royal tutoring documents, showing that young princes spent years learning not just statecraft and warfare, but also the secret names of gods, the formulas for protection spells, and the rituals for commanding invisible forces. As Amenhotep speaks the words of opening, the heavy stone door swings inward silently, revealing a descending staircase lit by oil lamps that burn with a strange blue flame, a flame created by adding specific minerals known only to the royal alchemists. The staircase spirals down deep beneath the palace, far below the foundations, into chambers carved from solid bedrock. This is the Per-Ankh, the House of Life, the most secret sanctuary of pharaonic power. Here, away from all eyes, the pharaohs practice the deepest mysteries of their divine office. The walls are covered not with the familiar hieroglyphs seen in temples and tombs, but with older symbols, pre-dynastic marks that some scholars believe may have been inherited from an even more ancient civilization, perhaps the mythical people the Egyptians themselves called the followers of Horus, who supposedly ruled in the age before the first dynasties. In the central chamber of the Per-Ankh stands an altar of black granite, and upon it rests an object that makes Amenhotep's heart quicken, a crystal skull, not made of ordinary quartz but of a strange transparent stone that seems to capture and hold light in impossible ways. This skull is one of the pharaoh's most guarded secrets, an artifact said to have been given to the first pharaoh, Narmer, by the gods themselves when Egypt was unified. But what power does such an object hold? Ancient texts, hidden in the archives of the Vatican and the British Museum, texts that mainstream archaeology often dismisses, speak of crystal skulls as repositories of knowledge, containing the accumulated wisdom of previous ages. The pharaohs believed that by meditating upon the skull while in a trance state induced by specific breathing techniques and the inhalation of sacred incense made from frankincense, myrrh, and the mysterious blue lotus flower, they could access this knowledge directly. Amenhotep has performed this ritual before, but tonight feels different. The urgency of his vision drives him. He prepares the chamber, lighting braziers that fill the air with aromatic smoke. The blue lotus, when burned, produces compounds that modern chemistry has identified as having mild psychoactive properties, inducing a state of relaxed awareness and enhanced intuition. The ancient Egyptians, however, did not think of it in chemical terms. To them, the blue lotus was the sacred plant of the god Nefertum, and its smoke opened the pathways between worlds. As the smoke swirls around him, Amenhotep begins the breathing technique taught to him by his predecessor, inhaling for 7 counts, holding for 7 counts, exhaling for 7 counts. This pattern, the sacred rhythm of 7, attunes the pharaoh's consciousness to the frequency of divine communication. The chamber begins to change. Or perhaps it is Amenhotep's perception that changes. The walls seem to recede, the space becoming infinitely larger, and the crystal skull on the altar begins to glow with an inner light. Now you might be wondering, is this real or merely the product of the pharaoh's altered state? The ancient Egyptians would not have recognized this distinction. To them, the world of visions and the world of physical matter were equally real, merely different aspects of the same unified existence. The pharaoh reaches out and places his hands on either side of the skull, and immediately his mind is flooded with images, not seen with his eyes but perceived directly by his consciousness. He sees the construction of the Great Pyramids, but not as mainstream archaeology describes it. He witnesses masters of sound, priests who understood that everything in the universe vibrates at specific frequencies, using tones produced by specially designed instruments to reduce the friction of massive stone blocks, allowing them to be moved with far less effort than should be physically possible. This technology, if it can be called that, was not mechanical but based on principles of resonance and harmonic alignment. Some researchers in modern times, working outside conventional academic circles, have attempted to replicate these techniques, producing fascinating if controversial results. The pharaoh sees these ancient priests, his distant ancestors, working with massive tuning forks, their minds unified in focused intention, singing the stones into place. But there is more. The vision shifts, and Amenhotep sees the true purpose of the pyramids, not merely as tombs, but as machines, devices for transforming and focusing cosmic energy, for facilitating the pharaoh's transformation in death from a mortal king into a star in the night sky, literally ascending to take his place among the imperishable stars that the Egyptians called the Duat. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the vision reveals, was designed with mathematical and astronomical precision that encoded profound knowledge. Its dimensions relate to the size and shape of the Earth with startling accuracy. Its internal chambers and passages align with specific stars and constellations, creating a three-dimensional map of the cosmos. But most importantly, the pyramid was a resurrection machine, designed to preserve and transmit the pharaoh's consciousness beyond death. How could the ancient Egyptians, working supposedly with only copper tools, achieve such precision? Wait for it, the answer lies not in the tools but in the knowledge. The pharaohs and their priest architects understood principles of geometry, astronomy, and earth energy that have been largely forgotten or dismissed by modern materialistic science. They knew that the earth itself has energy lines, called by modern researchers ley lines, and that the placement of structures at specific points on these lines could create powerful effects. The Great Pyramid sits at a nexus of such lines, its position carefully calculated. Moreover, the ancient Egyptians had instruments for measuring magnetic and gravitational variations that we would find incredibly sophisticated. Some of these instruments have been found in archaeological digs but are often misidentified as mere ceremonial objects because their true function is not understood. The vision continues, showing Amenhotep's secrets of the pharaonic succession. When a pharaoh died, a profound ritual was performed, one that went far beyond the mummification process known to popular history. The pharaoh's successor would spend 3 days and 3 nights in a sealed chamber deep within the pyramid, lying in the sarcophagus itself, undergoing a mystical death and rebirth. During this time, the new pharaoh would be in a state between life and death, his consciousness separating from his body and traveling through the Duat, the underworld, just as the sun god Ra did each night. But this was not metaphorical. The pharaohs believed they literally made this journey, and that upon returning to their bodies, they brought back knowledge from the realm of the gods and the wisdom of all previous pharaohs who had made the same journey. This ritual, known only to the highest initiates, was the true source of the pharaoh's divine authority and supernatural powers. Without completing this ordeal, a king was merely a man with a crown. With it, he became a living god, capable of seeing into the future, communicating with the divine realm, and commanding forces invisible to ordinary mortals. But the journey was dangerous. Not all who entered the sarcophagus returned. Some ancient texts speak cryptically of princes who failed the initiation, whose bodies were found in the morning without breath, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. What did they encounter in those dark hours? What tests did the gods administer? These questions have never been fully answered, for the pharaohs who successfully completed the ritual were forbidden to speak openly of what transpired. The knowledge could only be passed mind to mind, through the mysterious process the Egyptians called the opening of the mouth, a ritual that modern scholars think was simply about restoring the deceased senses in the afterlife, but which in its secret application among the living pharaohs was actually a technique for direct consciousness transfer, a way of downloading memories, knowledge, and power from one mind to another. Amenhotep sees in the crystal skull's vision that his own initiation is soon approaching. He has been pharaoh for 3 years, but has not yet undergone the full transformation. The vision shows him that the coming eclipse, just 3 weeks away, will be the perfect time, when the energies of sun and moon align in a way that happens only once every 52 years, creating a window between worlds that is more stable and safer for the crossing. But there is a warning in the vision too. The high priest Amenemheb, who has served for 30 years and oversaw the last pharaoh's initiation, is dying. Without him to guide the ritual, the new pharaoh's journey will be perilous. The vision fades, and Amenhotep finds himself once again in the chamber beneath the palace, his hands still resting on the crystal skull, his body covered in sweat despite the coolness of the underground chamber. He knows what he must do. Rising on unsteady legs, he makes his way back up the spiraling staircase, through the hidden door that closes silently behind him, and into the palace proper. The sky outside the windows is beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn, the time when Ra begins his daily journey across the sky in his solar bark, defeating the serpent of chaos, Apophis, and bringing light back to the world. This daily battle between order and chaos, between light and darkness, was central to Egyptian cosmology, and the pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Horus and the son of Ra, was responsible for maintaining this cosmic balance. Every morning, the pharaoh performed rituals to help Ra in his journey, adding the power of his divine consciousness to ensure the sun would rise. Modern minds might dismiss this as superstition, but consider how many ancient cultures, separated by vast distances, all believed that human ritual and consciousness could affect natural phenomena. Were they all simply wrong, or did they understand something about the relationship between consciousness and reality that our materialistic age has forgotten? Quantum physics has recently suggested that observation affects reality at the subatomic level. Perhaps the ancients understood this principle at a macro level, that focused intention and ritual could indeed influence the fabric of reality itself. Amenhotep sends word for the high priest to be brought to the palace, but the messenger returns with grim news. Amenemhab died during the night, his body found at dawn in the temple of Karnak, kneeling before the shrine of Amun, as if he had simply ceased to breathe while in prayer. The pharaoh feels a chill that has nothing to do with the morning air. Is this coincidence, or has the old priest's death been timed by forces beyond mortal understanding? Without Amenemhab, who will guide him through the initiation? The vision indicated that the knowledge must be transferred mind to mind, but now the last living pharaoh who had completed the full ritual has passed into the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. Wait, there may be one other possibility. In the far south, near the border with Nubia, there is said to dwell a hermit priest, a man who was once high in the temple hierarchy but who withdrew decades ago into solitude. This priest, whose name is spoken only in whispers, is rumored to possess knowledge from the Old Kingdom, the first age of pyramids, knowledge even more ancient than what the priests of Thebes preserve. Some say he is impossibly old, that he has lived for centuries through mastery of secret techniques involving the consumption of specially prepared herbs, minerals, and perhaps even the mysterious white powder that appears in some ancient texts, a substance modern researchers have speculated might be related to monoatomic gold, which some claim has life-extending properties. Whether this is true or merely legend, Amenhotep decides he must seek this hermit. He cannot approach his initiation unprepared, for to fail is to die, and his death would throw Egypt into chaos. Already there are enemies at the borders, the Hittites to the north growing in power, desert tribes raiding the western settlements, and conspiracies within the palace itself, for power always attracts those who would seize it. The pharaoh begins preparations for a journey that must be kept absolutely secret. He cannot simply march south with an army, for that would alert everyone to his departure and his purpose. Instead, he will travel disguised, accompanied only by 3 trusted companions who themselves have been initiated into the outer mysteries and sworn to absolute loyalty through rituals that bind not just their honor but, they believe, their very souls. These 3 are Neferu, a warrior trained in both physical combat and the mystical arts of the Medjay, the elite protectors of the pharaoh, Satmos, a scribe who has mastered not just the common hieroglyphs but also the older hieratic and the even more ancient demotic scripts, and most importantly, the secret script called the Words of the Gods that is never carved in stone but only written on papyrus that is destroyed after reading, and Tabia, a priestess of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess, who has powers of healing and the ability to see auras, the energy fields that surround all living things, allowing her to detect lies, illness, and even magical attacks. Together, these four set out as the sun reaches its zenith, traveling on a boat that appears to be a common trading vessel, indistinguishable from the hundreds that ply the Nile daily. The great river is Egypt's lifeline, and on its waters, people and goods flow constantly between the delta in the north and the cataracts in the south. The Nile itself was considered divine, a gift of the god Hapi, and its annual flooding, which deposited rich silt on the farmlands, was the foundation of Egyptian civilization. But the Nile held secrets too, hidden places along its banks where ancient temples had been carved into cliffsides, their entrances concealed by centuries of sand and rock. Some of these temples were deliberately hidden, created by mystery schools that predated even the first dynasty, schools where knowledge was preserved that the mainstream priesthood considered too dangerous or too sacred for common teaching. As they travel south, the landscape changes. The green cultivation along the riverbanks narrows, the desert pressing closer on both sides. They pass villages where life has remained unchanged for thousands of years, where farmers still use the same techniques their ancestors used in the time of the first pharaohs. They see the great temples, Karnak, Luxor, the tombs in the Valley of the Kings where the royal dead sleep in splendor, surrounded by treasures meant to accompany them into the afterlife. But are the treasures the real treasure? The ancient Egyptians believed that what truly mattered was not the gold and jewels, impressive as they were, but the spells and formulas inscribed on the tomb walls, the Book of the Dead, which was actually called by the Egyptians the Book of Coming Forth by Day, a manual for navigating the afterlife, for passing the tests administered by the 42 judges in the Hall of Ma'at, for being found worthy and achieving eternal life among the stars. Modern scholars often treat these texts as purely religious or symbolic, but what if they were also practical instructions, describing actual experiences that consciousness undergoes after death? Some researchers studying near-death experiences have noted striking similarities between modern accounts and ancient Egyptian descriptions, suggesting perhaps these texts were based on genuine experiential knowledge passed down through initiates who had died and returned, or who had achieved out-of-body states through advanced meditation techniques. On the third day of their journey, as the sun sets in a blaze of orange and red, painting the western desert in colors of fire, they reach a place where a narrow canyon opens in the cliffs. This is the place. Neferu, the warrior, goes ashore first, his senses alert for danger, for these border regions are not entirely safe. But the canyon is silent, almost preternaturally so, as if even the birds and insects avoid this place. They moor the boat and proceed on foot into the canyon, which winds deeper into the cliff face. The walls rise high on either side, and soon they are walking in deep shadow, the sky a ribbon of fading light far above. The temperature drops, and they become aware of a strange sensation, a tingling on their skin as if the air itself is charged with invisible energy. Tabia, the priestess, stops and closes her eyes, sensing with her inner vision. This place is a threshold, she whispers. The veil between worlds is thin here. We must be cautious and respectful. There are watchers, beings not of flesh who guard this path. The others nod, for they have been trained in these matters and know that the world is far more populated than what physical eyes can see. The ancient Egyptians recognized numerous classes of non-physical beings, from the Neteru, the gods themselves, to lesser spirits of place and nature, to the dangerous beings called the Kabit, shadow entities that could attach to the unwary and drain their life force. Protection spells had been cast before they departed, but here those protections must be reinforced. They pause while Satmos, the scribe, draws in the sand the symbol of the Shen ring, a circle of rope representing eternal protection, and speaks the words of power that activate it. The tingling in the air intensifies for a moment, then subsides, and they know they can proceed safely. The canyon opens into a hidden valley, and there, built into the rock face itself, is a temple unlike any they have seen. It is small, barely more than a cave with a carved entrance, but the energy emanating from it is palpable. Carved above the entrance in hieroglyphs so worn by time as to be barely legible are words that Satmos struggles to translate, for they are in an archaic form. Finally, he makes it out, "Here dwells he who remembers what the stars forgot." What could that mean? Before they can ponder it, a figure appears in the entrance. It is impossible to guess his age. He might be 60 or 600. His skin is weathered but not wizened, his eyes clear and penetrating. He wears only a simple linen kilt, and around his neck is an amulet, a scarab of lapis lazuli, carved with hieroglyphs that Satmos recognizes as incredibly ancient, from the time of Djoser or even before. "Welcome, Amenhotep," the hermit says, his voice resonant despite his apparent age. "I have been expecting you. Come, we have much to discuss and little time, for the eclipse approaches, and your transformation cannot wait." The pharaoh, despite being accustomed to respect and deference, finds himself somewhat awed by this man's presence. There is a power here, a centeredness and authority that comes not from crown or position but from knowledge and mastery. They enter the temple, and inside it is larger than it appeared from without, carved deep into the rock. Oil lamps burn with that same strange blue flame, and the walls are covered with star maps, not the familiar constellations but patterns that suggest the sky as it appeared in ages long past, for the slow precession of the equinoxes means that over thousands of years, the positions of stars change. These maps show the sky as it was 10,000 years ago, in the time the Egyptians called Zep-Tepi, the first time, when gods ruled directly upon the earth. But did such a time actually exist, or is it mythology? The hermit gestures for them to sit, and they arrange themselves on reed mats while he prepares a beverage, a mixture of herbs and honey that he explains will help them remain alert and receptive through the night, for they have much to learn. "You have come seeking guidance for your initiation," the hermit begins, "and it is not a question. You have seen in vision what must be done, but you fear to attempt it without a guide, now that Amenemhab has joined the ancestors." "I need to understand," Amenhotep says. "What truly happens in the sarcophagus? What will I face?" The hermit is silent for a long moment, then begins to speak. "The ritual you must undergo is death, not metaphorical but actual. Your heartbeat will slow to almost nothing, your breath will cease, and by any ordinary measure, you will be dead. Your ka, your life force, will separate from your physical body, and your ba, your consciousness soul, will begin the journey through the duat. This is the same journey every person makes after death, but you will make it while your body remains capable of return. The danger is that you may become lost in the duat, may fail the tests, may encounter the devourers who prey on souls, or may simply forget your body and drift away into the realm of the dead permanently." He pauses, letting this sink in. "But if you succeed, if you navigate the 12 hours of night, answer the riddles of the gatekeepers, pass through the hall of Ma'at with a heart lighter than the feather of truth, and reach the throne room of Osiris himself, you will be transformed. You will bring back with you the Sikhem, the power form of your being, fully activated. This is what makes a pharaoh divine, what gives him the ability to see clearly, to know the hearts of men, to command the natural forces through his will, and to connect directly with the Neteru, the gods." "But how is this possible?" Amenhotep asks. "How can consciousness leave the body and return?" The hermit smiles. You think consciousness resides in the body, but this is backwards. The body resides in consciousness. Your physical form is a temporary vessel, a tool that consciousness uses to experience this dense realm of matter. The ancient ones understood this. They knew that consciousness is primary, eternal, and that it can operate independent of flesh. What you call death is simply consciousness withdrawing from the physical vehicle when that vehicle becomes too damaged or worn to continue functioning. This teaching, so clearly stated in this hidden temple, is one of the core secrets of Egyptian spirituality, a truth that modern near-death researchers and consciousness studies are only beginning to rediscover. The hermit continues, during the initiation, special preparations are made. Your body will be placed in the sarcophagus within the king's chamber of the pyramid, for that chamber was designed specifically for this purpose. The proportions of the room, the materials of construction, even the so-called air shafts which are not for air at all but are aligned to specific stars, all of these create a unique energetic environment, a stable platform from which consciousness can safely project and to which it can safely return. You will ingest a preparation, a mixture of substances that will slow your body's functions to the minimum necessary to maintain life while your consciousness is absent. This preparation includes extracts from the mandrake root, the milk of the opium poppy, and a fungus that grows only in the depths of certain caves, a fungus that induces a state where the boundary between life and death becomes permeable. Wait, you might wonder, did the ancient Egyptians really have such sophisticated pharmacological knowledge? The answer is unquestionably yes. Modern analysis of mummy tissues has revealed the presence of nicotine, cocaine, and other compounds that supposedly did not exist in the Old World, suggesting either ancient global trade networks or plants that have since gone extinct in Africa but were available in ancient times. The Egyptians were master chemists, their priests spending lifetimes studying the properties of substances, learning which combinations could heal, which could kill, and which could alter consciousness in precise ways. This knowledge was guarded as jealously as any treasure, passed only from master to student under oaths of secrecy. The hermit describes in detail the process of the initiation, the prayers that must be spoken, the positions the body must be arranged in, the breathing techniques that must be mastered beforehand so they continue automatically even when conscious attention is elsewhere, and most importantly, the map of the Duat, the sequence of chambers, gates, and guardians that the pharaoh's consciousness will encounter. He produces scrolls, incredibly ancient papyrus covered with paintings and texts, genuine copies of the Book of the Dead but annotated with additional information not found in the versions placed in tombs, practical instructions for the living rather than merely prayers for the deceased. Each gate has a guardian, the hermit explains, and each guardian will ask you questions. But these are not intellectual puzzles, they are challenges to the very essence of who you are. They will confront you with your fears, your doubts, your failures, and shames. They will tempt you with illusions of power or pleasure. They will try to convince you to turn back or to take easier paths that lead to oblivion. You must remain centered in truth, in Ma'at, neither denying your flaws nor being destroyed by them, accepting yourself fully while maintaining your will and direction. As the hermit speaks, Amenhotep begins to understand that this is not a journey through a physical place but through the landscape of consciousness itself, through the layers of mind that usually remain hidden from awareness, the realms that modern psychology might call the subconscious and unconscious, but which contain vast knowledge, forgotten memories not just from this life but from previous incarnations, for the Egyptians absolutely believed in reincarnation, in the soul's journey through many lifetimes, refining and developing until finally achieving liberation from the cycle, joining the imperishable stars. The training continues through the night and for 3 more days. Amenhotep learns the secret names of the guardians, for in Egyptian magic, to know the true name of a being is to have power over it. He practices the breathing techniques, the visualizations, the mantras, learning to enter trance states at will, to separate his consciousness from his body briefly and safely while the hermit watches over him, ready to guide him back if needed. He learns to construct around himself the shell of protection, visualizing himself surrounded by light, calling on the power of specific gods to guard different aspects of his being, Thoth for his mind, Horus for his eyes and vision, Anubis for his passage through dark realms, Isis for her protection and magic. By the fourth day, the hermit declares him as ready as possible given the limited time. Remember, the old priest says, you do not make this journey alone. All the pharaohs who have gone before, all who succeeded in this initiation, exist in a collective consciousness, a brotherhood of the transformed. Once you enter the duat with intention and proper preparation, they will sense your presence and some will come to aid you, appearing as guides or protectors. Trust them, but also trust your own inner knowing, for ultimately only you can walk your own path. The hermit gives Amenhotep a final gift, a small golden amulet in the shape of the Bennu bird, the Egyptian phoenix, symbol of renewal and resurrection. Place this in your mouth before you enter the sarcophagus, he instructs. It contains within it a preparation that will help facilitate your return to your body. When it is time to return, the amulet will dissolve, releasing the substance, and you will feel your body calling you back. The pharaoh and his 3 companions prepare to depart, but before they leave, Amenhotep must ask one final question. Master, how old are you truly? Some say you remember the old kingdom, that you have lived centuries. Is this truth or legend? The hermit laughs, a surprisingly youthful sound. Time is a strange thing, young pharaoh. I have lived one life that spans many lifetimes, yes, through practices that slow the aging of the body and preserve the vitality of youth. I have walked beneath skies long gone, seen dynasties rise and fall, known pharaohs whose names are now forgotten even by historians. But more importantly, through meditation and journey work, I have accessed memories of previous incarnations, and so my consciousness spans thousands of years even though this particular body has weathered only 2 centuries. Which measure is more true? The Egyptians understood that personal identity is far more complex than the modern world believes. You are not merely Amenhotep, you are a consciousness that has lived many lives, accumulated vast experience, and chosen to incarnate as Pharaoh in this particular time for purposes known to your higher self. This teaching strikes Amenhotep deeply, resonating with something he has always felt but never articulated. The return journey passes in a blur, for the pharaoh's mind is focused inward, reviewing everything he has learned, preparing himself mentally and spiritually for the ordeal ahead. The eclipse is now only 3 days away. When they arrive back in Thebes, Amenhotep goes immediately to the temple and orders preparations to begin. The priests are told that the pharaoh will undergo a 3-day meditation retreat within the Great Pyramid, a plausible excuse that explains his absence without revealing the true nature of what will occur. A small group of the most trusted initiates is brought into the secret, for he will need attendants to monitor his body, to perform the necessary rituals, and to be present to help him reintegrate when he returns. If he returns. The night before the initiation, Amenhotep spends hours in the hidden chamber beneath the palace, holding vigil before the crystal skull, entering into communion with the consciousness it contains, preparing his mind and soul. He speaks to the spirits of his ancestors, asking for their protection and guidance. He performs rituals of purification, fasting, bathing in sacred water blessed with specific prayers, anointing himself with oils infused with protective herbs. He is both terrified and exhilarated. This is the moment toward which his entire life has been leading. The next morning, at dawn, the small procession makes its way to the Great Pyramid. It stands eternal and massive, its limestone casing stones, which once made it shine like a beacon visible for miles, still largely intact. They enter through the narrow descending passage, moving deep into the heart of the structure, then up the ascending passage and the grand gallery, finally reaching the king's chamber. The chamber is exactly as described, a room of perfect proportions, empty except for the large granite sarcophagus. The sarcophagus itself is a mystery. Modern analysis has shown that it was cut from a single block of incredibly hard red granite using techniques that remain unexplained, for the precision of its internal angles and the smoothness of its surfaces should have been impossible with the tools supposedly available to the ancient Egyptians. Some researchers have suggested that the cutting was done with saws tipped with jewels or with abrasives and techniques we no longer understand. But what if the methods were even stranger? What if, as some ancient texts suggest, the Egyptians knew how to soften stone temporarily through the application of specific plant extracts, allowing it to be shaped like clay before hardening again? Chemical analysis has found traces of organic compounds in supposedly stone surfaces that remain unexplained. Amenhotep removes his royal regalia, stripping down to nothing, for he must enter this journey as he entered life, naked and vulnerable. The priests begin their chants, ancient words in a language even older than Egyptian, words whose sounds are themselves vibrations designed to alter consciousness and energize the space. Tabia, the priestess of Sekhmet, burns incense and the chamber fills with aromatic smoke. Neferu and Satmos stand guard, their presences providing psychic protection as well as physical. The pharaoh drinks the preparation, bitter and thick, feeling almost immediately its effects as his heartbeat begins to slow, his vision becoming strange, colors intensifying while edges blur. He climbs into the sarcophagus, lies down on the hard stone, and places the golden Bennu bird amulet in his mouth. The priests position his arms and legs according to the precise formula, arrange around his body protective amulets, and then, speaking the final incantations, step back. The chamber grows silent except for the chanting, which continues at a whisper, a background drone that will maintain throughout the 3 days and nights of the pharaoh's absence. Amenhotep feels his consciousness beginning to separate from his body, a sensation utterly unlike anything he has experienced before. It is not like falling asleep, where awareness gradually fades. Instead, there is a definite moment of separation, a lurching sensation, and suddenly he is floating above his body, looking down at it lying still and corpse-like in the sarcophagus. He can see the priests, their auras glowing with different colors, Tobias a deep crimson red, Neferu's a warrior's gold, Satmos a scholar's blue. He can see beyond the physical walls of the chamber, perceiving the entire pyramid as a structure of light and energy, geometric patterns pulsing with purpose. Then he feels a pulling sensation, and the pyramid, the physical world, begins to fade. Darkness surrounds him, but it is not empty darkness. It is alive, filled with movement and whispers, voices calling his name, some welcoming, some warning, some attempting to deceive. This is the threshold, the space between worlds. The first test has begun. A figure emerges from the darkness, massive and terrifying, the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This is Ammit, the devourer, the creature who eats the hearts of those found unworthy in the hall of Ma'at. But wait, the pharaoh has not yet reached the hall of Ma'at. So why does Ammit appear here? Because this is illusion, the first deception, designed to trigger fear and cause the initiate to panic and lose their way. Amenhotep remembers the hermit's teachings. He centers himself, speaks the words of power, I am Horus, son of Osiris, heir to the throne of the living and the dead, I do not fear you, for I know your true name, and you have no power over one who walks in Ma'at. The creature wavers, becomes translucent, and dissolves like smoke. The darkness lightens, and Amenhotep finds himself standing before a great door of bronze, covered in hieroglyphs that shift and change as he watches. This is the first gate. Standing before it is a guardian, a being of pure light in the shape of a jackal, Anubis, the guide of souls. Who seeks to pass, the guardian asks, and his voice resonates in Amenhotep's consciousness rather than his ears. I am Amenhotep, Pharaoh of the two lands, son of Ra, who seeks the transformation and the power of the throne. Name the four sons of Horus, the guardian commands. This is a test of knowledge, but also something deeper, for the four sons represent the four elements, the four directions, the four aspects of the human being. Imzadi protects the liver and represents the south and the element of earth. Hapi guards the lungs and represents the north and water. Duamutep protects the stomach and represents the east and air. Kabasanuf guards the intestines and represents the west and fire. Amenhotep recites, but as he speaks, he feels each truth resonating in his own being, understanding for the first time that these are not merely mythological figures but actual principles, forces that maintain the structure of reality and of consciousness itself. The door swings open, and he passes through into a vast space, a corridor that seems to stretch infinitely, lit by torches that burn without consuming, casting shadows that move independently of their sources. Along the walls, he sees scenes from his own life, painted as if on tomb walls, his childhood, his coronation, his decisions as pharaoh, both wise and foolish, his moments of courage and his moments of fear. This is the chamber of self-reflection, where the initiate must witness their own life objectively, without justification or denial. Amenhotep walks slowly, observing, and as he does, he begins to see patterns he had not noticed before, how his fear of being thought weak had led him to make decisions that harmed innocents, how his desire for approval from the priests had caused him to ignore his own inner wisdom, how his attachment to being seen as divine had created a wall between himself and the genuine love and connection available from those around him. The realization is painful, but he does not turn away from it. He accepts it, understanding that to be truly powerful, he must first be truly honest. As he completes his walk through the chamber, the scenes fade, and he finds himself before a second gate, this one of silver. The guardian here appears as a beautiful woman with the wings of a hawk, Isis, goddess of magic and motherhood. What is the greatest power, she asks. This is a riddle, for the ancient Egyptians loved riddles, understanding that truth often cannot be stated directly but must be discovered through contemplation. Amenhotep considers carefully. In his training, he was taught that the greatest power is the word, for through words, reality is shaped. But wait, is that truly the deepest answer? Words themselves are tools of something greater. The greatest power is love, he finally answers, for love is the force that binds the universe together, that draws soul to soul, that motivates all creative acts, that even the gods themselves cannot resist or overcome. Isis smiles, radiant and warm, and the silver door opens. Beyond it, the landscape changes dramatically. He stands now on the shore of a vast river, flowing with stars rather than water, the celestial Nile, the river of souls. A boat approaches, piloted by a figure whose face is in shadow, and Amenhotep knows he must board this vessel to continue his journey. The boat moves silently through the starry current, and on either shore, he sees beings of all kinds, some recognizably human, others strange and alien, the souls of those who have died and are making their own journeys through the Duat. Some call out to him, asking for help, pleading to be remembered, to be prayed for. He wants to stop, to help them, but the hermit's warning echoes in his mind, do not be distracted from your purpose, for to stop is to risk never completing the journey. It is cruel, but it is necessary. The boat arrives at a great island in the middle of the stellar river, and upon the island stands a palace of crystal that radiates all the colors of creation. This is the dwelling of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, magic, and writing, the keeper of the divine records. Amenhotep disembarks and enters the palace, finding himself in a library beyond imagination, scrolls and tablets stacked to infinite heights, containing all knowledge that ever was or ever will be. And there, standing before a table upon which rests a glowing scroll, is Thoth himself. Young Pharaoh, the god greets him, his voice melodious and infinitely patient. You have come seeking power and transformation, but do you understand what you truly seek? I seek to become a bridge between heaven and earth, Amenhotep replies, to guide my people with wisdom, to maintain Ma'at, and to serve the divine purpose. Thoth nods slowly. Admirable, but there is a deeper truth. You seek to remember what you have always been, for the pharaoh is not made divine by the initiation, he is reminded of his divinity. Before you took this body, before you were born into the line of kings, your soul chose this incarnation, accepted this responsibility, knowing the challenges and the opportunities it would bring. The initiation does not grant you power, it removes the veils of forgetting so you can access the power that has always been yours. This teaching is profound, and Amenhotep struggles to fully grasp it. If he has always been divine, why did he not know it? Why must he undergo this ordeal? Because, Thoth continues, reading his thoughts, consciousness in physical form must operate under certain limitations. The density of matter requires a focusing, a forgetting of the vast self so that the small self can function. A god walking fully aware in a human body would be paralyzed by the enormity of what he knows and perceives. The human identity is a necessary restriction. But the pharaoh must be able to move between these states, to be fully human when needed and to access his divine nature when necessary. That is the secret of the throne, the ability to shift between levels of being at will. Thoth places his hand on the glowing scroll, and images appear in the air between them, showing Amenhotep scenes from his soul's history, lifetimes stretching back through ages, lives as a priest in Atlantis, a wanderer in ancient Lemuria, a student in mystery schools whose names are no longer remembered by history. He sees that he has been preparing for this incarnation as pharaoh for dozens of lifetimes, accumulating the wisdom, the strength, and the compassion necessary for the role. Understanding floods through him, and with it, a sense of purpose more profound than anything he has felt before. Now, Thoth says, you must face the final test, the hall of Ma'at and the weighing of the heart. Are you ready? Amenhotep nods, though fear still touches him, for this is the moment when many fail. The scene shifts, and he stands now in a vast chamber with pillars reaching into infinite height, the hall of Ma'at, the place of judgment. At the far end sits Osiris on his throne, green-skinned lord of the dead, and beside him stand the 42 judges, divine beings who assess every soul that passes through this hall. In the center of the chamber stands a great scale, and beside it waits Anubis, ready to perform the weighing. Step forward, Anubis commands, and Amenhotep approaches. The jackal-headed god reaches into the pharaoh's chest, not physically but energetically, and draws forth his heart, holding it up for all to see. The heart appears as a glowing red sphere, pulsing with life, but Amenhotep can see within it dark spots, places where fear, anger, or selfishness have left their mark. Anubis places the heart on one side of the scale, and on the other, he places the feather of Ma'at, the pure white feather of truth, justice, and cosmic order. The scale begins to move, and Amenhotep's consciousness focuses entirely on this moment, for if his heart is heavier than the feather, if his misdeeds outweigh his virtues, he will fail, and Ammit, who waits in the shadows, will devour his heart, destroying him utterly. The scale swings back and forth, and for moments that seem to last eternities, it remains uncertain. But slowly, steadily, the scale comes to balance, the heart and the feather perfectly equal. A murmur goes through the hall, for perfect balance is rare, most souls weighing slightly one way or the other. Speak, Amenhotep, Osiris commands, his voice deep as the earth itself. Declare your truth before the 42 judges. This is the negative confession, where the pharaoh must declare all that he has not done, all the evils he has avoided, addressing each judge in turn. I have not killed unjustly. I have not stolen from the poor. I have not caused pain for the pleasure of causing pain. I have not blasphemed against the gods. I have not polluted the sacred waters. On and on the confession continues, 42 declarations, and with each one, Amenhotep must speak absolute truth, for deception here is impossible. The hall itself resonates with Ma'at and would expose any falsehood instantly. When he finishes, Osiris rises from his throne and approaches, towering over the young pharaoh. You have passed the weighing, but now comes the final question, the one that determines not whether you may continue to exist, but whether you are worthy to return as a transformed pharaoh. Why should you be granted the Sikhem, the divine power? What will you do with it that serves the greater good and not merely your own glory? This is the question that reaches into the deepest core of his being. Amenhotep could speak of maintaining Ma'at, of protecting Egypt, of defeating enemies, all true and all worthy, but he senses that something more profound is required. Great Osiris, he begins, and his voice comes from a place deeper than thought, I ask for the power not because I am worthy, for no mortal is truly worthy of the divine, but because I am willing to bear the burden of consciousness, the pain of seeing clearly, the responsibility of acting with wisdom even when it is difficult or unpopular, the loneliness of standing between worlds, never fully belonging to either heaven or earth. I will use the power to awaken in others the remembrance of their own divinity, for a true king does not hoard power but shares it, teaches it, elevates those around him. I will use it to channel the will of the gods into action in the material realm, to be a conduit for divine creativity and order. And when my time as pharaoh ends, when this body fails and I return here permanently, I will pass the knowledge to my successor so that the chain remains unbroken and Egypt remains strong. Silence fills the hall, and then Osiris extends his crook and flail, the symbols of pharaonic authority, and touches them to Amenhotep's forehead. Power explodes through the pharaoh's consciousness, a rush of energy and knowing beyond anything imaginable. He sees simultaneously past, present, and future, understands the mathematical principles underlying the construction of reality, feels the thoughts and emotions of every soul in Egypt, connects directly with the divine consciousness that some call God, that the Egyptians call the Netir, the supreme source from which all the gods themselves emanate. It is overwhelming, ecstatic, terrifying, and beautiful beyond description. Information downloads into his awareness, the secret names of power, the true history of Egypt stretching back before the first dynasty to the time of the gods, the location of hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx containing records and technology from civilizations that predated even Egypt, the coming challenges that Egypt will face and how to navigate them, and most importantly, the technique for accessing this expanded state at will, even when returned to his physical body. The technique involves a specific breath pattern combined with visualization and the vocalization of certain sounds, a method that takes years to fully master but that Amenhotep now understands completely, instantly, through direct transmission. Return now, Osiris says, for your body calls you, and your work in the physical realm is not yet complete. Remember what you have learned here, use the power with wisdom and compassion, and know that we are always with you, for the gods dwell not in distant heaven but within the hearts of those who remember their true nature. The hall of Ma'at begins to fade, and Amenhotep feels himself being pulled back, the journey reversing, past Thotha's palace, across the stellar river, through the gates, each guardian nodding in respect as he passes, back through the threshold darkness that now seems less frightening, almost welcoming, and then he is in the king's chamber, rushing back toward his body lying in the sarcophagus. The reunification is jarring, consciousness slamming back into flesh, and suddenly he is gasping, his heart pounding, his body drenched in sweat. The golden amulet in his mouth has dissolved, leaving a taste of honey and something else, something metallic and electric. His eyes flutter open, and he sees Tabia leaning over him, her face a mixture of relief and awe. 3 days and 3 nights, my pharaoh, she whispers. We kept vigil as your body lay still as death. Welcome back. Amenhotep tries to sit up, but his body is weak from its long stillness, and Neferu and Satmos must help him from the sarcophagus. His legs shake as he stands, but already he can feel the new power within him, a core of energy and awareness that pulses steadily. He is transformed. The pharaoh and his attendants make their way slowly out of the pyramid, emerging into brilliant sunlight that makes him squint after the darkness of the chamber. The world looks different to his transformed vision, every person glowing with their own light, every plant and animal connected by invisible threads of energy, the sky itself alive with currents and patterns of force. He can sense the thoughts of those around him, not as words but as feelings and intentions, and he realizes with wonder and some concern that deception will be much harder to maintain around him now, for he will always know, on some level, the truth beneath people's words. This is both a gift and a burden, for sometimes illusions are kind, and truth can be harsh. Back at the palace, Amenhotep spends the next several days integrating his experience, learning to control the flood of information and perception, to dial down the intensity so he can function normally when needed. The priests notice the change in him immediately, not just because he tells them of his successful initiation, but because his very presence has altered. He radiates an authority and power that commands instinctive respect and even awe. Decisions that seemed difficult before now appear clear, for he can see the patterns, the likely outcomes of different choices, the web of cause and effect that extends from every action. He implements new policies, adjusts old traditions, and begins to guide Egypt with a wisdom that seems almost supernatural, because in a sense, it is. News of the transformed pharaoh spreads throughout the kingdom, and people speak in whispers of miracles, of how the pharaoh predicted the exact day of the Nile's flooding, saving crops that would have been lost, of how he diagnosed an illness in a visiting diplomat from symptoms that had baffled all physicians, of how he resolved a dispute that had festered for generations with a solution so elegant that both parties felt honored rather than compromised. Egypt enters a golden age under Amenhotep's rule, prosperity and peace such as has not been seen for decades. But the pharaoh himself knows this is not his accomplishment alone, he is simply channeling forces greater than himself, serving as the bridge he promised to be. Years pass, and Amenhotep grows in wisdom and power, but he never forgets the lesson of the hermit and the gods, that he is not separate from his people, not superior by nature but only by the knowledge and awareness he has been granted. He uses his power not to dominate but to serve, not to elevate himself but to elevate Egypt. He trains his son, the next pharaoh, in the mysteries, preparing him for his own initiation when the time comes, ensuring that the chain of knowledge remains unbroken. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Amenhotep returns to the hidden chamber beneath the palace, sits before the crystal skull, and communes with the consciousness it contains, adding his own experiences and wisdom to the repository, knowing that future pharaohs will access what he has learned, just as he accessed the wisdom of those who came before. The crystal skull, he has come to understand, is more than an artifact, it is a technology of consciousness, a device created by the ancient ones, perhaps the same beings who taught the first Egyptians the principles of civilization, a device that stores information not as words or images but as pure knowing, as experiential wisdom that can be directly transmitted from mind to mind across the centuries. As the story draws to a close, as you prepare to drift into your own sleep, remember the teachings of the pharaohs and the mysteries of ancient Egypt. Remember that consciousness is primary, eternal, and more powerful than any physical force. Remember that you, too, are divine, though you may have forgotten, that within you lies the same potential for wisdom, power, and transformation that the pharaohs accessed. Remember that death is not an ending but a transition, that your awareness will continue beyond the dissolution of your body, journeying through realms of light and shadow, facing its own tests and challenges, seeking always to return to the source from which all consciousness emanates. The pharaohs understood this, prepared for it through their entire lives, and approached death not with fear but with anticipation, knowing it as the ultimate adventure, the final initiation. As you fall asleep tonight, perhaps you will dream of ancient Egypt, of temples and pyramids, of gods with animal heads and wisdom beyond measure. Perhaps you will find yourself walking through the Duat, facing your own guardians, discovering your own hidden powers. Or perhaps you will simply rest deeply, peacefully, your consciousness retreating into that mysterious realm where healing occurs, where the day's experiences are processed and integrated, where you touch briefly the eternal before returning to waking life renewed. The mysteries of the pharaohs are not locked in the past, they are eternal truths, available to all who seek with sincere heart and open mind. Sleep now, dream well, and know that you are protected, guided, and infinitely loved by forces greater than you can imagine. The journey continues, life after life, experience after experience, always moving toward greater awareness, greater love, greater unity with the divine. Rest now, ancient soul in modern form, and may your dreams be filled with wonder, wisdom, and the eternal light that shines at the heart of all existence. The pharaohs bless you, the gods watch over you, and the great mystery welcomes you home, tonight and always, now and forever, in this world and all worlds, across time and beyond time, in the eternal now where past, present, and future merge into one timeless moment of perfect peace and infinite possibility. Sleep, beloved soul, sleep and remember who you truly are.